Good evening. Thank you for tuning in to Face to Face. I'm your host, Dennis Ward. Our guest this week is someone who has faced tragedy many of us cannot even fathom. Sue Caribou has nearly a dozen family members and close friends who've gone missing or been murdered. The Winnipeg woman was a strong advocate for the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, but more recently has felt victimized and left in the dark by the process. Sue, thanks for joining us here today. You have had a hard history of heartache that stretches back decades, and were one of those calling for the inquiry. What went through your mind when the announcement came that the national inquiry was going to moving ahead?
Well, at first I was excited that finally something was going to be done with the missing and murdered women and girls. And then I started realizing that they're keeping the families in the dark, and we don't know what's going on or what they're going to be doing. And I really lost faith on the last gathering at the Victoria, and they're not going to reinvestigate, reopen old case files, and most of my family are from the 1972 to still to when Tanya went missing. And after, even when Tanya went missing, I had other family members that were murdered. So it's an ongoing thing in my family, murdered mostly.
So when the inquiry was first announced, what was going through your mind in terms of your hopes? What were you thinking that was going to happen during the process?
I was hoping they would give us good news and then say they'll reinvestigate, reopen the cases, and if the police have missed anything in their cases, I was hoping that the inquiry would look into that. And obviously they're not going to. Or my understanding is they're not going to be doing that. So I've lost faith in the inquiry. I get emotional when I talk about the inquiry because, they should also have somebody that been through this missing and murdered in one of the commissioners, somebody that has experienced missing a loved one or a loved one being murdered. And I think that's only fair to the families, that they should have one commissioner or a couple of commissioners in the inquiry that have experienced this.
Do you think it'll be difficult for those commissioners to relate to some of the stories like yourself, like your own stories?
Yeah. I asked the inquiry, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for my family? And they couldn't answer any of that. They just said we can't reopen or reinvestigate old case cold files. But my niece, Tanya, she's 4 years this coming September. And I don't think that's old. And they promised my family 31 days to search at the Brady landfill, and they did 5 to 6 days. So I've been getting a lot of broken promises from a lot of people that I had faith in. And my family, like I said, they're falling apart too, because we keep getting all these hopes. They bring up new things to help the families. And then when they do come in to a round table, and then we hear different. When behind closed doors, you hear different things. But when they're public public speaking about the inquiry. They're all saying only about the good things, and but they're not saying, letting the family know that they won't be able to do a lot of the other things that the other families are hoping.
Sue, when did your faith in the inquiry change? There was the announcement that you were hopeful for. You were brought to Toronto as one of those round tables where a lot of promises were made. When did your opinion of the inquiry and your hopes for it begin to change?
Well, in Toronto, they only had 3 questions on the board: who you are, who your family member is, and what's your story. And a lot of the families didn't get a chance to hear the family stories. Like, they were gonna give up early in the afternoon, and they didn't hear any of my family stories. And I told them, I didn't get a chance to tell my story, and you're gonna give up and call it a day. And it was the last day of the round table. So I got upset, and I said, all these promises you guys make, how can you keep those promises if you're not going to listen to my story and other family stories? So I walked out of there, and Gladys from Wiping Away the Tears came, and she said, Sue, you deserve to tell your stories. You have a lot in your family, and we're going to ask that you tell your stories. So they called me back, and then they said, thank you, Sue, for picking us up when we fell down, and you brushed us off again, and we'll hear your story. But they didn't hear. I have 7 murdered and 2 missing, and it's impossible to hear all of them in such a short time. And if you're only given a limited time, it's impossible for 9 of my family members.
So you do a weekly drum circle here in the city of Winnipeg with other family members who have experienced this type of loss. And what are you hearing from them? Are they expressing some of the same concerns that you have with this process so far?
Yes, they are. They're giving up hope too, and they're saying, we're healing on our own by helping each other. And what is the inquiry going to do for us? Basically nothing. Some of the families said, what you started, Sue, is helping me heal, and you're just sitting here letting me tell you about my loved one. And then you play the drum for me when I'm done my story, and then all of us start drumming. And I have that every second Thursday. And now I'm working on other things to help families, because obviously a lot of the families are giving up hope on the inquiry, and they want to start healing. They don't want to keep on reopening the wounds, the hurts. Then they keep telling the stories over and over and over, and they get back into that deep depression. When I got back from Toronto, I went into depression. And when I go into depression, I lock myself at home, or I stay in a room. I don't answer my phone. I don't even feel like eating. I sleep. And I struggle every day to get out of bed. So it's an everyday thing that goes on in the families. And right now, I'm terrified to lose my family because some of them are at high risk suicide. They have given up hope. And if the inquiry is so sincere about helping families, all families, it's not only women and girls that are gone missing. It's also men and boys, like my uncle, my nephew, my brother, and my 2 grandfathers. They were murdered. So who's advocating for the men? No one is, and the inquiry is not even calling out the boys and the men. So I'm gonna look into helping out the families that have a loved one that's missing, a man or a boy.
Sue, unfortunately, I have to hold you there for a quick second, and we got to take a quick break. You're watching Face to Face. We'll continue our conversation with Sue Caribou in just a few minutes. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest is Sue Caribou. Caribou has nearly a dozen family members and close friends who have gone missing or been murdered over the past 40 years. Sue, your family has experienced a legacy of violence and loss, but you also have 2 nieces who are accused of taking the life of another Indigenous woman. How difficult is that to come to terms with for you and your family?
That was very hard for my family because both girls, well, we won't be able to see them. We're not going to ever see them again. They're separated. One is in Alberta, and the other one is in the highest security pension. I don't know. You know, they don't even let us know what's going on with our 2 nieces that are in jail. And they got such a heavy time. And when that lady died of her injuries, the girls are friends with the Thelmas, and I'm also friends with their uncle. And they got a lot of time, a lot of years for what they did. And the person that murdered my parents got 8 years good behavior. He shot 5 people, and he only did 8 years good behavior. And my niece are doing triple that, and it was self-defense, you know. So our system is not fair, and my sister lost 3 daughters, Tanya, Candace, and Vanessa, and then she lost her husband from so much stress. The cancer was just going fast because we were searching for Tanya for months and months, and it cost a lot of money to search. You know, my brother-in-law must have spent over $5,000 searching for Tanya out of his own money. And most of the families that have a loved one missing, they're struggling. They got no funds to go search for their loved one. It causes a lot of money.
You know, Sue, a lot of families are struggling. What do you think, what type of supports do you think could be in place right now during the inquiry and after for these families and for families like yourself?
I think they should, before the inquiry comes, we should have a gathering with elders to have a ceremony before we go into the inquiry, and to support each other, and like write down what we want to ask the inquiry. You know, different family members have a different suggestion, and that's what I'd like to do at the Thunderbird House, if I can call out families to come to Thunderbird House and have a gathering and talk about what we're going to ask the inquiry.
So you've been critical of the money the commissioners are receiving here, anywhere from $170,000 to $272,000 for these commissioners. You said you believe some of that funding could be used to help families search. As you mentioned, you know, it's very expensive to search for.
It's very expensive. The money that they're getting paid, they should be donating half of it to a foundation or to some of the families, or put it in a trust fund where if you lose a loved one and you need money to search for your loved one, that money should be there. If they're so sincere about wanting to help families, well, donate some of the money to help the family search for their loved ones. Like, I have a foundation called Families First Foundation, and we've been fundraising, and the AMC helped us start the foundation, and I'm ready to help out the families with the fundraising that we did on the Families First Foundation. We have money in our foundation, and I'm ready to help families, and this is how I've been healing, is by reaching out to other families that are going through the same situation. I'm getting to a point where I'm really I really don't have faith in our justice system. I have no faith in the inquiry whatsoever. And, you know, I would like the inquiry to have two people that had been through this, and somebody from Manitoba, like a couple of them, because they're all from Quebec or from other places besides Winnipeg. There should be somebody representing Winnipeg.
As mentioned by one of the commissioners, you know, this is, she called it ground zero here in Winnipeg for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Sue, unfortunately, we got to take another quick break, but we'll be right back with more Face to Face in just a few minutes. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest is Sue Caribou, who's feeling victimized by the current process with the National Inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Sue, do you have hopes that the inquiry will end up meeting expectations that you initially had and those of other family members?
No, I don't. I really don't have any hope. I'm going to ask the inquiry if they're so sincere in helping my family. I'd want them to dig the Brady landfill and give us the other days that they promised the family, 31 days. Well, I want the rest of those days at the Brady landfill to be dug for my niece, if they're so sincere in helping my family. If they can reopen the cold case files, well, at Tanya is not a cold case file. You know, they know there's a body up there. Do they care to go digging up there for my niece? It's like considering my niece, she's trash, and leaving her in a dump. And my niece is not trash. She shouldn't be at the dump. And there's no way we're going to go to the Brady landfill to pay our respects to a pile of garbage when we don't even know if they're going to continue the search. You know, they offered us to put a monument at the Brady landfill, and my family broke down. my niece don't belong at the Brady landfill. We're not going to put a monument at the Brady landfill because she's not trash. And for my two grandfathers and my brother and my nephew and uncle, the inquiry should be including the boys and the men too, because I have a lot of them too in my family. I'm just really giving up hope on faith in the inquiry. They haven't done anything to help me, but put me back in deep depression. I had to use my heart spray in Toronto, and that's the first time I used my heart spray in a long time.
So you and I have talked that you feel that when the testimony starts that some of these family members, yourself included, might feel re-victimized by some of the questions that come to you from the commissioners.
Yeah, that's what they're doing, because this is the pre-inquiry, the round table, and the Toronto round table. It was all the same. They kept reopening, asking the same, and we kept telling our same stories, the stories that our loved one is missing. You know, they continue to hurt the families. They're not helping us, they're hurting us.
So we're running short on time here. Do you have a message, if you had one, for the commissioners right now on how to best make this inquiry go the way you'd like to see it?
If the inquiry is so sincere, they should be equal with women, boys, men, girls. And then if they're so sincere, why don't they start a fundraise on to give money to the family to search for their loved ones? And they got the Brady landfill for my niece for the other days they promised us. I'm terrified to lose my sister Joyce. I don't want to lose her. She's deep depression. She's in very deep depression.
Sue, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and your thoughts on the ongoing national inquiry right now. I know it's going to be next few months will be difficult, and we wish you and all the other families all the best. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. We're always looking for new guests, so if you have any suggestions, please email us at news@aptn.ca. Thank you for tuning in to Face to Face. I'm Dennis Ward.